My name is Lydia Martinez, and at 58 years old, I thought I had seen everything life could throw at me. I raised my daughter Sarah as a single mother after my husband passed 15 years ago. And when she married Marcus 2 years back, I felt like I could finally breathe again. He moved into our little house here in Phoenix, Arizona, and at first everything seemed perfect. But lately, something strange has been happening. Money has been disappearing from my wallet, from my savings jar, from places I thought were safe. I kept telling myself I was just getting forgetful, but deep down I knew someone was taking it. Before I share what happened, that changed everything, let me know where you are watching from. And please hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will show you how sometimes the most shocking discoveries lead to the most unexpected lessons about trust and family. I have always been a creature of habit. Every morning at 7, I would make my coffee in the same blue mug my husband Robert gave me 20 years ago. Every evening, I would count the money in my wallet and put it back in the same spot on my dresser. After Robert died in that car accident, when Sarah was just 23, I learned that structure was the only thing that kept me sane. Sarah was always my bright star. She excelled in school, got good grades, and had big dreams of becoming a teacher. But when it came to men, she seemed to have a talent for picking the wrong ones. There was Jake, who borrowed her car and never returned it. Then came David, who convinced her to drop out of college to support his music career that never took off. Each heartbreak taught me to be more protective, more watchful. So when Marcus appeared in her life during her second attempt at community college, I was naturally cautious. He was handsome in that polished way, with dark hair always perfectly styled and a smile that could charm anyone. He had this way of speaking that made everything sound important, even when he was just talking about the weather. Sarah was smitten from their first date. The wedding was small, held in our backyard under the old oak tree. Marcus explained that his family lived back on the East Coast and could not make the trip. I found it odd that not a single relative showed up, but Sarah was so happy that I pushed my concerns aside. He seemed to genuinely love her, and that was all that mattered to me at the time. After the honeymoon, Marcus lost his job at the marketing firm downtown. He said it was company layoffs, nothing personal. Sarah picked up extra shifts at the salon where she worked as a hairstylist to make ends meet. When they could not afford rent on their apartment, I suggested they move in with me temporarily. The house had 3 bedrooms, and I figured we could all save money while Marcus found new employment. Those first few months, Marcus was the perfect houseguest. He cooked dinner most nights, kept the living areas clean, and always asked if I needed anything from the store. He would spend hours on his laptop in the kitchen, supposedly job hunting, sending out resumes, and making phone calls to potential employers. Sarah would come home exhausted from work, and he would have her favorite meal waiting. But as weeks turned into months, I started noticing things. Marcus rarely left the house except for quick trips to the grocery store. He never seemed to have interviews scheduled. When I asked Sarah about his job search, she would get defensive and say he was being selective about the right opportunity. The selective process seemed to be taking an awfully long time. My mother's instinct, honed by years of raising a daughter alone, began sending up red flags. There was something about the way Marcus watched me when he thought I was not looking. Something about how he always seemed to know my schedule better than I knew it myself. Something about the way he would quickly close his laptop whenever I entered the room. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, but the feeling would not go away. The first time I noticed money missing, I was sure it was my mistake. I always kept a $20 bill folded behind my credit cards for emergencies. When I went to pay for groceries and it was not there, I figured I must have spent it and forgotten. After all, I was getting older, and memory lapses happen to everyone. But then it happened again and again. $5 from my wallet. $10 from the ceramic jar I kept on top of the refrigerator for pizza money. $20 from the envelope in my bedroom, where I saved coins and small bills for Sarah's birthday gift. Each time I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. I started paying closer attention to my money, writing down amounts and checking more frequently. That was when I noticed the pattern. Money only disappeared on days when Sarah was at work, and I was supposed to be at the insurance office where I had worked for the past 12 years. The thief knew my schedule. One Tuesday morning, I told Sarah I was leaving early for a dentist appointment, but instead of going to work, I parked around the corner and walked back to watch the house. Through the kitchen window, I could see Marcus moving around the living room. But he was not cleaning or organizing like he usually claimed to be doing during the day. He was searching through the drawers of the antique desk where I kept household papers and bills. When I came home that evening and casually asked what he had done that day, Marcus said he spent the morning looking for the remote control that had gone missing. But I had seen the remote on the coffee table when I left that morning, and it was still there when I returned. The lie was so casual, so confident that it chilled me. I tried talking to Sarah about my concerns without directly accusing her husband. I mentioned that money seemed to be disappearing and asked if she had borrowed any cash recently. Sarah immediately got defensive and asked if I was accusing Marcus of stealing. When I said I was just trying to figure out where the money was going, she accused me of never giving Marcus a fair chance because I disapproved of him being unemployed. That conversation made me feel isolated in my own home. Sarah was choosing to believe Marcus over her own mother, and I could not blame her. Love makes people blind to faults, and I had been young and in love once too. But this was different. This was about survival and safety in the place where I was supposed to feel most secure. I started hiding money in different places to test my theory. Small amounts in my makeup bag between the pages of books inside empty pill bottles. Within days, the money was gone from every single location. Marcus was not just randomly searching for loose cash. He was conducting thorough, systematic searches of my personal belongings. The violation felt worse than the actual theft. Knowing that someone was going through my private things, touching items that belonged to me, invading spaces I considered sacred. I began keeping a detailed log of what was taken, and when preparing evidence for a confrontation I was not sure I was ready to have. As the weeks passed, Marcus became bolder. The amounts increased from $10 or $20 to $50 or $60 at a time. He stopped being careful about putting things back exactly where he found them. Drawers would be slightly askew, papers shuffled differently. Items moved from their usual spots. It was as if he wanted me to know what he was doing. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. Every morning when I left for work, I wondered what I would find missing when I returned. Every evening, I had to resist the urge to search through my belongings to see what had been disturbed. The constant anxiety was affecting my sleep, my appetite, my ability to concentrate at work. When I tried to discuss the situation with Sarah again, she became angry and accused me of being jealous of her happiness. She said I was looking for problems because I could not accept that she was married and had her own life now. The conversation ended with her storming out of the house and not speaking to me for 3 days. I realized that Marcus had successfully driven a wedge between Sarah and me. Whether intentionally or not, he had positioned himself as the victim of my suspicions, while painting me as the paranoid, controlling mother who could not let go. Sarah was forced to choose sides, and she chose the man she loved over the mother who was trying to protect her. The isolation made everything worse. I could not confide in co-workers because the situation was too embarrassing to explain. How do you tell people that your son-in-law is stealing from you while your daughter refuses to believe it? How do you admit that you feel unsafe in your own home, but cannot do anything about it because it might destroy your relationship with your only child? One night around 3 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of drawers being opened in the living room. My heart pounded as I lay in bed listening to the careful, deliberate sounds of someone searching through furniture. I knew it was Marcus, and I knew Sarah was sound asleep beside him, or so I thought, until I heard her voice asking groggily what he was doing. His response was smooth and practiced. He said he could not sleep and was looking for the antacid tablets he thought he had left in the desk. Sarah mumbled something about checking the bathroom medicine cabinet and went back to sleep. But I heard Marcus continue searching for another 20 minutes after that conversation. The next morning, I found $67 missing from 3 different hiding places. The precision of the theft told me that Marcus had been systematically mapping out every place I kept money. He knew my habits better than I knew them myself. It was time to set a trap. I decided to leave a small amount of money in an obvious place and hide in the hallway closet to catch him in the act. But as I was planning this confrontation, something inside me rebelled against the idea. Did I really want to destroy my daughter's marriage? Did I want to be responsible for her heartbreak? Was I absolutely certain that Marcus was the thief? The doubt was enough to make me hesitate, but the fear was enough to make me act. I could not continue living in a state of constant anxiety, always wondering when the next violation would occur. Something had to change, and if Marcus would not stop on his own, I would have to force his hand. Instead of setting up a surveillance trap, I decided to try a different approach. I wrote a note and placed it in my wallet, where Marcus would be sure to find it. The message was simple and direct. I know what you have been doing. We need to talk. I thought the note would scare him into stopping, or at least force a conversation where we could address the situation like adults. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe he was in some kind of trouble and too proud to ask for help. Maybe we could work something out that would not involve destroying Sarah's happiness. That evening, I went to bed early and pretended to fall asleep, but I was actually listening for any sounds from the rest of the house. Sarah had taken a late shift at the salon and would not be home until after midnight. Marcus was alone with me in the house, and if my suspicions were correct, he would not be able to resist the opportunity to search for money while we were both supposedly asleep. Around 2 a.m, I heard my bedroom door creak open just a few inches. My heart was beating so loudly, I was afraid Marcus might hear it. I kept my breathing steady and deep, pretending to be in a sound sleep while listening to the soft footsteps approaching my dresser. I heard the quiet sound of my purse being unzipped, followed by a long pause. That must have been when he found the note. I expected him to leave immediately, but instead I heard him moving toward my dresser. What was he doing? Why was he still searching if he had found my message? Through barely opened eyes, I watched as Marcus knelt down and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, the one I rarely used except for storing out-of-season clothes. But Marcus seemed to know exactly what he was looking for. He moved aside the winter sweaters and reached toward the back corner, where I kept a small wooden box that had belonged to my husband Robert. My breath caught in my throat as Marcus lifted the box out of the drawer. I had not opened that box in over a year. It contained Robert's love letters to me from when we were dating, some photographs from our early marriage, and his wedding ring that I could not bear to get rid of after the accident. Why would Marcus know about that box? And why would he be interested in items that had no monetary value? Instead of taking the box and leaving, Marcus sat down on my bedroom floor and opened it right there. In the dim light from the hallway, I could see him carefully examining the letters, reading them one by one, with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was not the look of a thief searching for valuables. It was the look of someone searching for answers to questions I could not even begin to imagine. When Marcus picked up one of the photographs and held it closer to the light, his entire body went rigid. His hands started shaking as he stared at the picture, and I heard him make a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Something about that photograph had affected him profoundly, and I could not understand what or why. I could not stand the mystery any longer. Against every instinct that told me to stay hidden and safe, I sat up in bed and turned on the bedside lamp. Marcus spun around with the photograph still in his hand, his face pale and streaked with tears I had not expected to see. "We need to talk," I said, echoing the words from my note. "Right now." Marcus collapsed completely when the light came on. He sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by letters and photographs, crying like a child who had lost everything. It was not the reaction I had expected from a confronted thief. This was something much deeper, much more complicated than simple greed. "I am so sorry," he whispered over and over. "I am so sorry, Lydia. I never meant for any of this to happen." I climbed out of bed and sat down on the floor across from him, the contents of Robert's memory box scattered between us, like pieces of a puzzle I did not yet understand. Marcus was still clutching the photograph that had affected him so strongly. When I looked closer, I realized it was a picture of Robert and me at our wedding, both of us young and radiant with happiness. "Why are you looking through my husband's things?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as possible, despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "What are you searching for?" Marcus looked up at me with eyes so full of pain that I almost felt sorry for him. "Robert Martinez," he said, his voice breaking on the name. "He was my father." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at Marcus, trying to process what he had just said. "Robert Martinez. My beloved husband, who died in a car accident 15 years ago, was Marcus's father. That was impossible. Robert had never mentioned having children. We had talked about starting a family, but it never happened, and Robert said he was fine with it being just the two of us." "That is impossible," I said. "Robert never had children. He would have told me." Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and took a shaky breath. "He did not know about me until I was 18. My mother, Patricia, had an affair with him before he married you. She never told him she was pregnant. She raised me alone and told me my father was dead." The room seemed to tilt around me as Marcus continued his explanation. "When my mother was dying of cancer 5 years ago, she finally told me the truth. She gave me his name and said he lived in Phoenix. By the time I found him, he was already gone. The accident had happened 6 months earlier. I felt like I was drowning in information that did not make sense. So you came here to find me. You married my daughter to get close to me." "No," Marcus said quickly. "I met Sarah at school before I knew who she was. I fell in love with her completely honestly. It was not until she started talking about her family, about her mother, Lydia Martinez, whose husband Robert had died, that I realized the connection." The truth was even more horrifying than I had imagined. "You married your own half-sister," I whispered. Marcus nodded miserably. "I did not know until after the wedding. Sarah was pregnant then, and I thought maybe we could just never tell anyone. Maybe it would not matter. But she lost the baby a month later, and I kept thinking it was my fault, that somehow our blood relationship had caused it. I remembered Sarah's sadness last fall, how she had been tired and emotional for several weeks. She had told me she was just stressed about work, but now I understood what had really been happening. She had suffered a miscarriage and dealt with it alone, while her husband carried the secret of their relationship. "The money," I said, the pieces finally starting to come together. "Why were you taking my money?" "I hired a private investigator," Marcus admitted. "I wanted to know if my father had really loved you, or if you were just another woman he had deceived like he did my mother. I needed to understand what kind of man he was, whether the stories my mother told me were true, or if she was bitter and lying." The revelation reframed everything I thought I knew about the past several months. Marcus had not been stealing from me out of greed or malice. He had been trying to piece together the truth about his father's character and his own identity. The violation I felt was real, but the motivation behind it was completely different from what I had assumed. "You could have just asked me about Robert," I said. "You did not need to sneak around and take money and lie to all of us." "How could I ask you?" Marcus said, his voice rising with emotion. "How could I tell you that your husband had an affair? How could I tell Sarah that our marriage was illegal and wrong? How could I destroy everyone's life just to satisfy my own need to know the truth?" The next few hours were the longest of my life. Marcus and I sat on my bedroom floor until dawn, surrounded by the remnants of Robert's memory box, trying to figure out what to do with the truth we had uncovered. Marcus told me everything about his childhood with Patricia, about the stories she had told him about Robert, about his decision to find his father's family after she died. According to Marcus, Patricia had painted Robert as a charming man who made promises he never intended to keep. She said he had told her he loved her and wanted to marry her, but when she told him she was pregnant, he disappeared without explanation. She spent years bitter and angry raising Marcus alone while working 2 jobs to make ends meet. But the Robert I knew was nothing like the man Patricia had described. My husband was loyal, honest, and devoted to our marriage. He had never given me reason to doubt his faithfulness or his character. Either Patricia had lied to Marcus about the nature of her relationship with Robert, or I had been completely blind to my husband's true nature. As we talked through the night, I began to understand the impossible position Marcus had found himself in. He had fallen genuinely in love with Sarah before learning about their family connection. By the time he discovered the truth, they were already married and she was pregnant. The decision to stay quiet and hope for the best had been made out of love and desperation, not calculation or malice. When Sarah came home from her late shift that morning, she found Marcus and me sitting at the kitchen table with coffee and red eyes from crying. She took one look at our faces and knew that something life-changing had happened while she was gone. "What is going on?" she asked, setting down her purse and looking back and forth between us. "Why are you 2 awake so early? Why does it look like someone died?" I looked at Marcus, giving him the choice of whether to tell Sarah the truth himself or let me do it. He nodded slightly, accepting the responsibility that was rightfully his. "Sarah," he said, his voice hoarse from hours of talking, "I need to tell you something about my family, about your family, about us." Sarah sat down slowly, her face already showing the fear that comes when you know you're about to hear something that will change your world forever. Marcus took her hand and began explaining about Patricia, about Robert, about the connection that made their marriage more than just legally problematic. I watched my daughter's face as she processed the information. First there was confusion, then disbelief, then a growing horror, as the implications became clear. When Marcus finished talking, Sarah sat in silence for a long time, staring at her hands. "We are brother and sister," she finally whispered. "Half siblings," Marcus corrected gently. "Same father, different mothers." Sarah pulled her hand away from his and stood up abruptly. "I need to think," she said. "I need to be alone right now." She went to their bedroom and closed the door. Marcus and I could hear her moving around, opening and closing drawers, and we knew she was packing a bag. When she emerged an hour later with a suitcase in her hand, she looked at both of us with an expression I had never seen before. "I cannot be here right now," she said. "I cannot look at either of you right now. I am going to stay with Lisa for a while, until I figure out what to do." The weeks that followed Sarah's departure were the darkest period of my life since Robert's death. The house felt empty and haunted, filled with the ghosts of secrets and lies that had destroyed my family. Marcus moved out the same day Sarah left, taking only his clothes and personal items, leaving behind the life we had all tried to build together. I spent those first days alone, replaying every conversation, every interaction, every moment I might have seen the truth if I had been looking for it. The signs had been there, Marcus's knowledge of our family history, his interest in Robert's belongings, his reluctance to talk about his own background. But love and trust had made me blind to the possibility that our family was built on a foundation of hidden connections. Marcus left me an envelope with $500 in cash, repaying every penny he had taken over the months he lived in my house. Along with the money was a letter apologizing for the deception and explaining that he was leaving Phoenix to give Sarah and me space to heal. He promised never to contact us again unless we reached out to him first. But as the initial shock and anger faded, I found myself thinking about Marcus differently. He had not set out to deceive anyone. He had fallen in love with Sarah, honestly discovered a terrible truth, and made decisions based on fear and love rather than malice. His choices had been wrong, but his motivations had been understandable. 2 weeks after Marcus left, I decided to drive to the cemetery where Robert was buried. I had not visited his grave in over a year, but I needed to talk to him about the son I never knew he had. Standing beside his headstone, I found myself angry at Robert for the first time since his death. How could he have kept such a secret from me? How could he have had a child and never mentioned it? But as I stood there in the afternoon sun, I realized that I might never know the truth about Robert and Patricia's relationship. Maybe Robert had not known about the pregnancy. Maybe Patricia had never told him. Maybe the affair had been brief and meaningless to him while being life-changing for her. The dead cannot defend themselves or explain their choices. More importantly, I realized that Marcus was suffering too. He had lost his wife, his home, and his family in one devastating night. He had been searching for a father he would never meet, and found instead a complicated truth that destroyed his chances for happiness. Whatever Robert's sins had been, Marcus did not deserve to pay for them alone. After a month of silence, I decided to reach out to Marcus. I found his phone number in Sarah's old contacts and sent him a text message asking if he would meet me for coffee. He responded immediately, agreeing to meet at a small cafe downtown the next afternoon. When I saw Marcus again, he looked like he had lost 20 pounds and aged 10 years. His clothes hung loose on his frame, and his eyes had the hollow look of someone who had not been sleeping well. We sat across from each other in the nearly empty cafe, both of us unsure how to begin a conversation about something so complicated and painful. "I have been thinking about everything you told me," I said finally. "About Robert, about Patricia, about the choices you made. I think I understand why you did what you did, even if I do not agree with all of it." Marcus nodded, but did not speak. I could see that he was bracing himself for more anger, more accusations. "I want to know more about your father," I continued. "Not the man Patricia described, but the man you knew from her stories. I want to understand what his life was like before he met me." Over the next 2 hours, Marcus shared stories about his childhood, about Patricia's struggles as a single mother, about the questions he had carried his whole life, about his father's identity and character. Some of Patricia's stories painted Robert in an unflattering light, but others revealed a man who was charming, intelligent, and capable of great kindness. As Marcus talked, I began to see a different side of the story. Maybe Robert had genuinely cared for Patricia, but felt trapped by circumstances. Maybe he had been young and scared when she told him she was pregnant. Maybe he had made mistakes that he spent the rest of his life trying to atone for by being a better husband to me. When our coffee cups were empty and the afternoon sun was fading, I made a decision that surprised both of us. "I want you to stay in Phoenix," I told Marcus. "I do not want you to disappear from our lives just because this situation is complicated." Marcus looked at me with surprise and something that might have been hope. "What about Sarah? What about the fact that we were married?" "Sarah is going to need time to process all of this," I said, "but running away is not going to help any of us heal. You are part of this family now, whether we planned it that way or not. We need to figure out how to move forward together." The next step was convincing Sarah to meet with us, which took another month of careful conversations and gentle persuasion. When she finally agreed to have dinner at the house, it was the first time the three of us had been in the same room since that devastating morning when the truth came out. Sarah had been seeing a counselor to help her process the trauma of learning about her relationship with Marcus. She was still hurt and angry, but she was also beginning to understand that they had all been victims of circumstances beyond their control. Marcus and Sarah decided to file for divorce, but they wanted it to be amicable and respectful. Over the following months, we slowly rebuilt our relationships on new foundations. Marcus became like the brother Sarah had never had, and the son I had never expected to gain. We learned to talk openly about Robert's complicated legacy and the way his past had shaped all of our futures. Sarah moved back into the house while she saved money for her own apartment. Marcus found a job at a different marketing firm and rented a small place across town. We had dinner together once a week, and gradually we began to feel like a family again, just configured differently than any of us had imagined. The healing process taught me that families are not always what they seem to be from the outside. Sometimes the people who hurt us are also the people who need our forgiveness the most. Sometimes the truth is more complicated than we want to believe, and sometimes love means accepting imperfection and moving forward anyway. Marcus never stole from me again, but more importantly, he never had to. Once we started talking honestly about money, about struggles, about the need for help, we found ways to support each other that did not involve deception or secrecy. Trust, I learned, is not about never being hurt by someone you love. Trust is about choosing to remain open to love even after you have been hurt. Looking back on that terrible night when I caught Marcus searching through Robert's memory box, I realize it was the beginning of the most important lesson I have learned in my 58 years. Sometimes the people we think are stealing from us are actually searching for something we did not know we could give them a place to belong. And sometimes the greatest gift we can offer is not our money or our possessions, but our willingness to understand the complicated reasons why people make the choices they do. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was keeping a secret that changed everything about your relationship? How did you find the strength to rebuild that trust? Or did you decide it was too broken to repair? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please take a moment to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories about family forgiveness and the surprising ways life can bring us together, and share this with someone who might need to hear that even the most complicated family situations can be healed with patience and understanding. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you all the courage to face your own difficult truths with open hearts and minds ready for unexpected grace.